exhibit from 12/14/49. Sergeant, I know that was brief. This clip ends right about there, but I'll try and pause it there. Well, Sergeant, let me just ask you, the very last second of this clip, which is, I believe, the very last second of this clip, we see a light that's shining towards the defendant. Whose light was that?
I know that I shined my light from my flashlight.
Do you know if anyone else shined a light from their flashlight at that point?
It's possible.
But you're not 100% certain?
I'm not.
For the record, I'm now publishing the second clip on that same exhibit, states Exhibit 1. Sergeant, I paused this video and it looks like there's someone top of the fence right where I've circled underneath the 28 on the date stamp. And for the record, I paused it at 12:14 and 57 seconds. Who is at the top of the fence right there?
Sergeant Weeks.
Sergeant, who is it that just sort of toppled over the fence right here and is lying on the ground?
That would be me. The fence got the best of me on that one.
What happened there, Sergeant?
My shoelaces grabbed over the top of the fence.
Now at this point, in looking at States Exhibit 1, Clip 2, are you able to see where Sergeant Weeks is?
At that moment, no.
Has Sergeant Weeks gained sufficient distance from yourself and Officer Hall to no longer be in this frame?
Yes.
And Sergeant, the last individual over the fence that's running in the same direction as yourself and Weeks, who is that?
Officer Hall.
And for the record, that was paused at 12:15:04 a.m. Sergeant, were you injured in any way by that fall over the fence?
No, sir, I was not.
Were you able to get up and continue pursuing the defendant, trying to serve that warrant?
I was.
Now, Sergeant, at this point, do you recall if anyone was saying anything?
I recall Sergeant Weeks yelling for Mr. Tillis to stop and drop the knives.
Do you recall specifically what it is that he's saying, or generally what he was saying?
Stop and drop the knives. And I also was yelling to stop.
Can you please explain to the jury what happened next?
Mr. Tillis continued to flee through his yard up toward the front of his truck, or to the left of his truck, which was parked up near the front of his residence. And the three of us continued to pursue him through his yard.
Was anyone able to get close to the defendant when he ran up to the left of his truck towards the front of his house?
Sergeant Weeks was initially the closest, and I was behind him.
Were you able to observe what happened when Sergeant Weeks approached the defendant towards the front of the truck?
Yes. Mr. Tillis, once he got to the left of his truck up near the front, turned back toward Sergeant Weeks, squared off toward him again with his body. It might be easy for me to demonstrate it.
Sure, if you mind. If you would aid your testimony here today, Your Honor, may the witness step down.
So he turned around, squared up toward Sergeant Weeks with a knife in each hand, presented himself in a manner which could be a threat to anyone.
Thank you, sir.
Even though it was a brief time, it was still a threat with a knife in each hand.
Thank you, Sergeant. At this point, how did Sergeant Weeks respond?
He continued to run toward Mr. Tillis.
As Sergeant Weeks grew closer to the defendant, what did the defendant do?
He turned and continued to run. He turned away from Sergeant Weeks and ran toward the front of his vehicle.
And what happens when he runs towards the front of his vehicle?
He fell down near the front of his truck.
Was Sergeant Weeks able to close the distance between between himself and the defendant at this point when the defendant fell?
He was.
Did you observe what happened when Sergeant Weeks made it to the defendant at the front of the truck?
Mr. Tillis was on his back, and he delivered a deliberate kick to Sergeant Weeks' chest.
Could you describe how he did that?
As he was on his back, and Sergeant Weeks went in to grab one to effect the arrest, the defendant, with the motion of his leg, kicked Sergeant Weeks in his chest.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Please, I'm going to ask you to take a look at this. That's one of the exhibit marked as Exhibit A. And without explaining to the jury what it is, you should tell me if you recognize it.
Yes.
And how do you recognize it?
The boots that we're wearing there.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer to evidence was previously marked as Exhibit A as the next number of exhibit.
Any objection? No, sir.
Permission to publish it, to the jury, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Maggie, make sure you get a sticker of that.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Now, Sergeant, a moment ago you testified that the defendant delivered an upward kick towards Sergeant Weeks. At this point, how did Sergeant Weeks respond?
The two of us then, if I recall correctly, the two of us then collapsed on top of Mr. Tillis, who had then turned himself onto his stomach area and concealed both of his hands.
At some point, were you and Sergeant Weeks able to get his hands out from underneath him?
Yes.
And were you able to place him in handcuffs at that point?
Yes.
Throughout this entire time, up until the point that you ever put cuffs on the defendant's arms, did he ever stop resisting or eventually give up?
Eventually, yes.
When was that?
After approximately 30 seconds to a minute of fighting with us.
And is that before or after you had the handcuffs on?
That was prior to the handcuffs.
At this point, did you place him in handcuffs?
Yes.
Once he was placed in handcuffs, did you have the opportunity to inspect him for any types of injuries?
We did.
Did you notice anything that required any kind of immediate medical attention?
No, sir.
Was rescue offered to the defendant?
Yes, sir.
Did he decline that offer?
He did.
Did he ever complain to you about anything, any medical issue that needed to be addressed at that point?
No, sir. And we specifically asked him if he had any injuries or required any type of medical treatment.
At some point, was this defendant placed in the back of one of your patrol cars?
Yes, sir.
Whose patrol car was that?
My patrol car.
Why was it your patrol car?
I think mine might have been the closest.
Did you ultimately end up being the arresting officer in this case?
Yes, sir.
And did you end up being the officer who authored the arrest and booking report?
Yes, sir.
At some point, was an evidence technician called to the scene?
Yes, sir.
Just so the jury has some understanding, what is it that an evidence technician usually does when they're called to the scene?
An evidence section comes out, they take pictures and photograph any evidence that might be present, and then sometimes collects evidence, sometimes does not. In this case, we collected the evidence based on the nature of the incident. However, the evidence technician came to photograph the incident and photograph the evidence.
Your Honor, permission to publish exact copies of State's Exhibits 6 through 14 on the jury's monitors?
Those photographs?
Yes, Your Honor, it's the evidence technician photographs.
Yes, sir.
Sergeant, is anything on your screen in front of you?
Yes, sir.
And what is it that we're looking at there?
Photograph of Mr. Tillis' residence with his truck and background of his house.
Now, a moment ago, you described the struggle that took place between the defendant and Sergeant Weeks, and then ultimately yourself when you joined in. Is it anywhere near the area that's captured in this exhibit? What's marked as State's Exhibit G, and what's displayed on your screen is State 7, but I believe is actually State 6.
It's close to it.
You say close to it, whereabouts did it actually occur if it's not captured in this frame?
The actual struggle occurred in front of the truck. It's kind of outside.
Sergeant, does this photograph capture the area where, let me ask you this, do you recall going back to the scene and seeing any or finding any knives, or finding the knives the defendant had in his hand?
Yes,
Does this photograph capture those knives?
it does.
Can you please circle the area on the screen where those knives are featured? For the record, the witness has circled the area at the bottom of the pillars, essentially in the center of the frame. Sergeant, I want to turn your attention to what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 7, what's marked on the screen as State's 8. What are we looking at here?
These are the two knives that Russell Tillis was in possession of.
Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor?
Okay.
Sergeant, I'm showing you what's been entered into evidence previously. States 14 and 15, do you recognize these?
Objection, duplicative, Your Honor. Overruled.
Are these the same knives that are captured on State's Exhibit 8 that's initially?
Yes.
Sir, please. Sergeant, I'm showing you what's entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 10, that's marked as State's 11 on your screen. What are we looking at here?
This is a picture of Sergeant Weeks and the boot print that was left after Mr. Tillis struck him in the chest.
Sergeant, I want to turn your attention to State's Exhibit 12, entered as 13, or entered as 12, marked as 13 on your screen. Is this the defendant as he was in the night question?
Yes, sir.
Now, Sergeant, I see a patrol car in the background. Is that your patrol car?
Yes, it is.
Prior to this photograph being taken, was the defendant placed in your patrol car?
I believe so.
Sergeant, was there an evidence technician that was on scene when you guys made the arrest of this defendant? Or did he arrive at a later time?
He arrived at a later time.
In the time between the defendant was arrested and the time that the evidence technician arrived, where was this defendant placed?
He initially was placed at the gate inside his property.
And eventually were you able to get him out from behind the gate and into a patrol car?
Correct. The patrol car was actually parked in the driveway.
The driveway to the defendant's house?
Yes.
And is that where this photo was taken?
Yes.
Is the back of the patrol car where this defendant remained from the time he was arrested until the evidence technician arrived?
I believe so.
Sergeant, turn your attention specifically to the glasses that are on the defendant's face. Do you see those?
Yes, I did.
Did you place those on the defendant that evening?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see Sergeant Weeks or Officer Hall place those on the defendant that evening?
No, I did not.
Your Honor, I have one moment for...
You may.
serve the warrant that you've been trying to serve on this defendant.
Yes.
After this, was it your responsibility to document your involvement in this case by way of a written report?
Yes, it was.
And was that the arrest and booking report in this case?
Yes.
Now, Sergeant, in this case, you authored the report, is that correct?
That's correct.
And your supervising officer was the listed victim, is that correct?
That's correct.
Why is it that Sergeant Weeks, your supervising officer, did not write a report himself?
Because he was the victim in the incident.
Explain to the jury why that's significant.
Just because once you're a victim, especially as a police officer, you don't want to have any involvement as far as authoring a report in which someone's arrested. When you're the victim in that incident.
Sergeant, in regards to the content of your report, is the content of your report your recollection of the events that happened that day?
Correct. It's my recollection of those events that day.
At any point, did Sergeant Weeks tell you what to write in that report or tell you to change anything that was in that report?
No, I did not.
Your Honor, at this time, the state has no further questions for this witness.
Okay, hold on, Mr. Boyle, we're gonna take a quick stretch break. So, Mr. Boyle, we got an issue with that?
No, sir. No, sir. No.
Members of the jury, remember, do not discuss the case among yourselves, and we'll see you back in 2 minutes.
Sergeant, all I'm trying to get at is, during the process of this case, the defense has received the call logs from that evening of the
Your Honor, I would
22nd.
object to counsel testifying at this point.
Well, let me finish the question, and then you can object. Don't answer the question if there's an objection.
During the course of this case, sir, we have received the call logs from the evening of the 27th, around 11:40. That is the first one concerning any incident in Mr. Tillis' property in reference to serving his warrants. Would you know why that's the case?
Is there an objection?
Yes, Your Honor, I would renew that objection.
Sustain.
So as you sit here today, Sergeant, you don't have a memory as to whether you logged out on the 26th or the afternoon of the 27th?
No, I don't.
That would establish exactly what time you arrived at Mr. Tillis' property and tried to serve that warrant, correct?
Potentially, yes.
Afternoon of the 27th of May, when you stepped on the nail, Sergeant Weeks was not there, was he?
He was.
Sergeant, again, referring back to March 14, 2016, do you remember giving a deposition in this case?
I did.
You were placed under oath prior to the beginning of that deposition, correct?
Correct.
It was the same oath that you took in front of this jury today, correct?
Correct.
Both cases are subject to the penalties of perjury, correct?
Correct.
And for the record, for counsel, page 117, lines 2 through 9. Sir, do you recall me asking you the question, on the second time on the 27th, was Sergeant Weeks out there? Answer, no, sir. Question, okay. So the first time Sergeant Weeks had some involvement would be late on the 27th, early on the 28th. Answer, yeah, just over, dash, just past midnight that same day. That is inconsistent with what you testified here today, correct, sir?
Correct. In my preparation for today, in my recollection of events, I recall him being there when I stepped on the nail.
Okay. So, but back in March of 2016, you had not prepared for that deposition?
I was mistaken with my answer.
So you gave mistaken information under oath during this deposition. Is that your testimony?
Sure.
You say sure. Do you think that's not a big deal?
No, I did.
So now you remember that Sergeant Weeks was actually out there on the 27th, correct?
Yes, 'cause he made a decision to where we went as far as the original.
Did you or Officer Hall tell Sergeant Weeks that you guys had actually seen Mr. Tillis on the 26th?
I do not recall.
And again, We talked about the call logs for those 2 prior attempts. No reports whatsoever were generated or authored by anyone in reference to trying to serve the warrant on the 26th or the afternoon of the 27th, correct?
We do not generate any type of report in an attempt to serve a warrant.
Okay. Didn't ask whether that's the property. No reports were generated for those 2 attempts, correct, sir?
Correct, no reports were
Sir, it's also your sworn testimony that Sergeant Weeks did throw rocks at Mr. Tillis' property, correct?
generated. I believe that he did throw rocks.
Okay, so do you still believe that? Or is that something that now, after preparation, you realize was mistaken?
No, from that night, I believed I saw him throw rocks.
Sergeant, you've testified that you observed the encounter between Mr. Tillis and Sergeant Weeks out in the street that's partially displayed by that video, correct?
That's correct.
And you're the one who wrote the sworn affidavit to support the arrest of Mr. Tillis for these charges, correct?
That's correct.
In that sworn affidavit, you described the distance between Sergeant Weeks.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the hearsay. The police report is not evidence.
Counsel, approach. Okay, Mr. Boyle, go ahead and rephrase the question.
Sergeant Bailey, you said you observed the encounter between Mr. Tillis and Sergeant Weeks out on the roadway, correct?
Correct.
You believe there were 12 feet between Sergeant Weeks and Mr. Tillis at the time Mr. Tillis allegedly turned with the knives in his hands, is that correct?
That was the estimation I gave, yes.
And in fact, you believe that you were particularly good at estimating distances based on your prior experience lining football fields, yard markers on football field, correct?
Correct.
Do you still believe that there were 12 feet between Mr. Tillis and Sergeant Weeks during the encounter on the road?
I would say it was further.
Why do you now believe it was further?
After seeing the video.
So, having had the opportunity to review the video that we've reviewed in court, you now realize that 12 feet is not accurate, correct?
That was my estimation at that point, based off the angle that I had at that time of night.
Sergeant Weeks, did you ever hear, excuse me, Sergeant Bailey, did you ever hear Mr. Tillis say anything when he was out in the roadway?
I did not.
Or prior to coming out off the fence of the neighbors?
I did not hear him say anything.
Sergeant, you testified that you saw Mr. Tillis running along the ditch line after jumping the neighbor's fence. Is that correct?
Running through the Eichenloch's property, not along the ditch line.
Okay, so if I wrote down that you testified running along the ditch line on direct, that was simply an error?
That would be accurate.
How far behind Sergeant Weeks were you while running through Mr. Tillis's yard?
I would estimate 30 to 40 feet.
And was that consistent throughout the foot chase?
For the most part.
Until Sergeant Weeks stopped running, correct?
Correct.
And then you obviously got much closer and actually participated in the apprehension of Mr. Tillis, correct? Sir, do you see where the rocks that you threw went on the property?
My rocks were aimed more toward the walls that surround the pull-behind camper in front of the property.
And that would be on, if you're looking at the property front right-hand side, correct?
Yes, sir.
Sergeant Bailey, at some point in reviewing the videos for this case, did you ever notice where you can actually see someone who's in that trailer poke his head out?
Yes.
Okay. You have now learned that during this entire incident, there was someone inside that trailer, correct?
Correct.
You didn't know that that night, did you?
No, sir.
Sergeant, you've described the encounter, let's call it, out in the street, and then Mr. Tillis turning while being pursued by Sergeant Weeks inside his yard, correct?
Correct.
You would agree, as to the second encounter in the yard, that it was basically just a turnaround, look at Sergeant Weeks, and keep running, correct?
Although it was brief, he still displayed a knife in each hand and was a threat.
Okay.
And
Okay,
was
my
squared
question-
up to Sergeant Weeks.
My questions, again, sir, is you would describe that little incident as basically a turnaround, look at you, and keep running, correct?
And squared up to you, yes.
And squared up to Sergeant Weeks again, meaning similar to how he squared up to him out in the street, correct?
I mean, with your entire body facing Sergeant Weeks.
Okay, and you believe that happened, the similar squaring up happened twice, once in the street, once in the yard, correct?
I don't believe I'm positive.
Okay. That's your testimony today.
Correct.
And that turnaround, let me ask, how far was Sergeant Weeks from Mr. Tillis when he did the turnaround in the front yard?
Approximately, I would say less than 15 feet.
Okay. And during that time, Sergeant Weeks is still running at Mr. Tillis full speed, correct?
I wouldn't say full speed, but close to it.
Okay. And Sergeant Weeks doesn't hesitate at all. He never slows down or pulls up or does anything in response to Mr. Tillis turning around and looking at Sergeant Weeks, correct?
I don't recall him slowing down.
Did you hear Mr. Tillis say or do anything during the turnaround look at Sergeant Weeks?
Hear him say anything? No. Doing, yes. He displayed 2 knives, one in each hand, and was a threat.
Okay. But specifically, and I asked the question before, that's my fault, sir. You didn't hear him say or yell or grunt anything at that point in time, did you?
No, but also with that, you have to understand that during stressful situations like this, and you have an elevated heart rate when you're chasing someone, officers tend, and anyone in general, but they tend to have auditory exclusion and tunnel vision, so you might not necessarily hear what someone says, you might not necessarily see something that they do. So he might have said something, he might have yelled something, however, I did not hear.
That's a concept that's familiar to police officers, the idea of auditory exclusion, correct? In stressful incidents, that the human brain sometimes just doesn't process sounds, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And sir, you didn't make any mention of any sort of a war cry or battle cry or aggressive yell that Mr. Tillis did as he was squaring up with Sergeant Weeks the second time in the yard, did you?
No, I did not hear anything.
You also don't describe him as squatting down at all, do you?
In the report, no.
Nor in your sworn deposition that we took in March of 2016, correct?
No.
It's your testimony, Sergeant, that Mr. Tillis gets to the ground by way of either falling or stumbling, correct?
Correct.
You didn't see Sergeant Weeks do anything to get him on the ground?
For him to initially fall,
Yes, sir.
I do not recall seeing Sergeant Weeks do anything for him to initially fall.
And you didn't do anything to make Mr. Tillis fall or get on the ground, did you?
No, sir.
And Officer Hall was actually behind you in this pursuit, correct?
Correct.
So he couldn't have done anything to make Mr. Tillis fall, correct?
Correct.
Where Mr. Tillis goes down, it's near the thing that looks like the well on that property, correct?
I would say more toward the front of his vehicle. I think ultimately where we ended up was a little closer to the well, but initially where we fell was toward the front of his vehicle.
Refer back to that sworn deposition you gave in March of 2016, Sergeant, page 135, lines 12 through 22. Specifically lines 18. This is your answer, he then turns around, continues to run around the front of
Objection,
the
Your
truck.
Honor. I object. This is improper impeachment. May we approach the deposition?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Sergeant Bailey, in deposition, March 14, 2016, do you recall testifying, he then turns around, continues to run around the front of the truck, in which he falls over towards the front. There's like a wall. There was like a well or something over here as well, and he falls down near there.
Yes.
So he falls down near the well that you were referring to, correct?
Well, the well is near the front of his truck. He initially falls down toward the front of his truck. However, our struggle eventually takes us closer to that well, which is off to the front right of his vehicle.
And you, sir, you didn't see Mr. Tillis flailing at all while on the ground, either before or after Sergeant Weeks goes hands-on with it, correct?
No, I believe he turned over onto his stomach after the kick and then concealed his hand beneath his chest.
And to be clear, the kick that you say you saw, where were you in reference to Sergeant Weeks and Mr. Tillis?
Directly behind him. Or off, I would say off to the side, to where I could see the side profile of Sergeant Weeks.
When Sergeant Weeks, when you saw the kick, how close was Sergeant Weeks to Mr. Tillis?
Less than 5 feet. And close enough to where he could be kicked.
Okay, so he must have been, and Mr. Tillis was on his back at this time, correct?
Correct.
Back was on the ground near the truck, the well, whatever, correct?
Correct.
And he kicked, was it more up or out or diagonal?
I recall it being a kick upward.
Okay, so Sergeant Weeks would have had to have been literally standing over top of him to be caught with a kick upward to the chest, correct?
Yes.
You never saw Mr. Tillis drop or throw any sorts of knives, did you?
I don't know.
When you eventually went hands-on with Mr. Tillis as well to assist Sergeant Weeks to take him into custody, correct?
Correct.
At that time, were you under the assumption that Mr. Tillis still had those knives?
Yes, I was.
And during that time, Mr. Tillis, you said that Mr. Tillis just got over onto his stomach on his own, correct?
I recall him turning over onto his stomach and concealing his hands.
That was not something that Sergeant Weeks assisted him with, or forced him to do, or manipulated him to get him over onto his stomach.
Was it possible?
Sir, you just testified that Mr. Tillis just got onto his stomach on his own.
But it's also possible that he could then turn onto his stomach as well.
At the time that you saw Mr. Tillis go from his back after delivering his kick to onto his stomach, where was Sergeant Weeks?
Right there with Mr. Tillis.
Okay. How? Can you describe how he was positioned in reference to Mr. Tillis on the ground?
He was tangled up with Mr. Tillis.
So he was on the ground too.
I don't recall if he was still upright or if he was down on one knee or on the ground floor.
That part of this incident you don't remember?
I don't know.
At some point, does Officer Hall come to assist you and Sergeant Weeks take Mr. Tillis into custody?
No, sir.
What does he do during this?
He's standing behind us.
And what specifically did you do to assist Sergeant Weeks taking Mr. Tillis into custody?
Delivered several strikes to Mr. Tillis's lower back and leg area.
With what?
My hand.
Okay, so you punched him?
Yes.
Okay, and what was the purpose of that?
To get control of his wrist and handcuff him.
I could understand striking someone in the shoulder to try to get that arm out. How would striking someone in the lower back or the leg assist you to get their hands out from underneath them?
Because down the side of your leg, you have a common peroneal nerve that is also attached to your sciatic nerve. it tends to allow you to free your hands once you get that pain compliance.
Pain compliance is what you refer to as.
Yes.
So you hurt someone until they do what you want them to do.
When they're resisting, then we use whatever resistance to overcome that resistance.
Wait, but specifically that term, pain compliance, you inflict pain in order to get someone to comply, correct? That's what it means.
Yes.
Sir, following the struggle that you described on the ground, striking Mr. Tillis to get him in custody, eventually handcuffs went on, correct?
Correct.
How long, from start to finish, after Mr. Tillis hitting the ground, the handcuffs going on, how long was that?
Approximately 30 seconds to 1 minute.
And once handcuffs went on Mr. Tillis, was there any further resistance of any sort?
No, sir.
Any belligerent attitude from Mr. Tillis whatsoever once those handcuffs went on?
No, sir.
He was, to quote a phrase, a model prisoner at that point, correct?
I've never said that.
But, I'm saying, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but there were absolutely no issues with Mr. Tillis' behavior once handcuffs went on, correct?
Correct.
Following the arrest of Mr. Tillis, you took certain steps to, one, complete the arrest and booking report for Mr. Tillis, correct?
Correct.
And to see to possible evidentiary matters, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So one of you guys called a crime scene detective to come to the scene, correct?
Correct.
And you had contact with the neighbor immediately to the left of Mr. Tillis' property, correct?
Correct.
You referred to that as the Eichenlaw residence, correct?
Correct.
When did you first have contact with someone from the Eichenlaw residence? After Mr. Tillis' arrest.
Within an hour after his arrest.
So while you were still there, out at the scene, completing the paperwork, waiting to transport Mr. Tillis to jail, is when you had contact with the Eichenlaws, correct? Or
Yes,
Mr.
sir. They were a victim in this due to damage to their fence.
May I have your approach?
Yes, sir.
Okay, members of the jury, need to take a quick stretch break. Remember, do not discuss the case, and we'll see you back in a few minutes.
Did you learn at that time that the Eichenlaw residence has multiple security cameras, surveillance cameras, all over his property?
At that time, no.
Okay, and so when did you learn that fact?
The next day.
Okay, and what steps did you take the next day or any time after that to try to determine whether there was any useful footage stored or saved by any of those video cameras?
The next day, I returned to the Eichenlaw's property and made contact with Mr. Eichenlaw, who provided me with a still photo of Mr. Tillis on his property the night before, prior to the arrest.
But it's your understanding, sir, that that video system that he has stores actual movies, moving images, correct?
It's not my knowledge, no. I do not know how his video surveillance system operates.
Okay. Have you, now a sergeant with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, you've come across many situations in which video surveillance might be an important part of the case, correct?
Correct.
Anything that happens at, say, a convenience store or a department store could be very likely be on video, correct?
Correct.
You have experience with handling, for lack of a better word, digital evidence of that sort, correct?
Collecting it, yes.
Okay. And if you have any questions, you can rely on the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Technical Support Unit, correct?
I have never used them.
Okay. Do you know that there is one at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
It's possible.
Okay. You know that there's a unit in the Sheriff's Office that specifically does things like download cell phones and computers and things of a digital nature, correct?
Correct. However, I've never worked an incident in which I've had to use them.
Okay. So were you or were you not aware that that resource was available within your own department?
Yes. However, there are certain cases that would require them to be used.
So you essentially learned from the Eichenlobs that Mr. Eichenlob himself could not provide you any video footage, correct?
Correct.
It was just the still images, correct? And you took no steps to see if anyone could actually get video footage off of his system, correct?
I did not.
In addition to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Technical Support Unit, there's the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that, again, has an entire unit devoted to extracting digital information off devices, correct?
Possible.
You're not aware of that either?
I'm not.
As a sergeant now, you supervise police officers out in the field, correct?
Correct.
Are you familiar with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Crime Laboratory Evidence Submission Manual?
No, sir.
Okay. That tells officers how to collect evidence for proper forensic processing down the road. Are you aware of that?
I've never seen
I'm the objector on counsel testifying, the witness testified he had no knowledge of that.
Well, yeah, sustain.
Sir, you were the arresting officer, Mr. Tillis, so in addition to preparing the reports in this matter, you were also primarily responsible to determine whether any evidence had to be submitted for processing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and in this case, you submitted the 2 knives that were collected to see if there were any fingerprints on those knives, correct?
I did not.
Who did?
Officer Hall,
Okay. When was that done?
that same night.
Okay. Why would, okay, when I say submitted, when he submitted the knives, did he also request that they be checked for fingerprints, or was that done later?
I have no idea.
Okay. Did you ever fill out a form indicating that you were the one requesting that the knives be processed for fingerprints?
I did not.
Okay, one moment.
Yes, sir.
You never requested, and Officer Woodwright, or Sergeant, you did not request any processing be done with those knives, correct?
I did not.
You did not request any processing be done with those boots that you identified either, did you?
I did not.
Those boots, in fact, were never collected and taken into evidence by anyone with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, were they?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. You're aware that shoe print impressions are things, it is a thing that expert witnesses can analyze to see if it matches a footwear impression to a piece of footwear, correct?
Correct.
Was that ever done in this case?
It was not.
Again, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office can rely on the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for that type of analysis, correct?
Possibly.
Okay. Did you take any steps to look into footwear impression comparison in this case?
I did not.
Concerning the neighbor of Mr. Tillis that we were able to get video surveillance from, when did you first have contact with that household?
The afternoon of the 28th of May, 2015.
The afternoon.
Correct.
Okay, so the day after, Mr. Tillis is taken into custody shortly after midnight on the 28th. You would have gone home, were shipped over, went back to work, and then spoke with that Mr. Daniels the afternoon of the 28th?
Correct.
Okay, and at that point, you learned that Mr. Daniels also has video surveillance system with cameras all around his house, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you take any steps to obtain video surveillance from the Daniels residence?
He was unable to provide us.
Did you take any steps to get video surveillance from the Daniels residence?
No, sir.
Okay, you didn't request the assistance of anyone else?
No, sir.
So on the afternoon of the 28th of May, it's your testimony that neither you nor any other officer that you have knowledge of or are aware of actually received video surveillance from Brandon Daniels.
That's correct.
Do you recall Mr. Daniels approaching you guys in the night shortly after Mr. Tillis was taken into custody?
I did not speak to Mr. Daniels at all during that time.
Do you
Nor
know-
did I see him speak to any other officer on the scene.
Okay. Are you aware, why did you go to Mr. Daniels' residence?
The next day, I was told by Mr. Eichenlaw that he potentially had video surveillance.
And you learned he did in fact.
Yes.
Were you able to view the video that afternoon of the 28th?
Yes, sir.
Sergeant Bailey, why is your interaction with the Eichenlaws and the Daniels, why is that not reflected in any report in reference to this case?
Looking in hindsight, it should have been. However, nothing was collected outside of a photo that was emailed.
Okay. Look, those still photos from Mr. Eichenlaw, they were obtained by the Jackson Sheriff's Office, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you did get that.
I did.
That's not documented anywhere.
Correct.
Those pictures were never submitted to evidence, correct?
Correct.
As the arresting officer, you're required to actually go down to the state attorney's office and complete a filing affidavit on a felony arrest, correct?
Certain felony cases, yes.
Either you have to go down or you have to do a transmittal filing, correct?
Correct.
But on all felonies, you have to do a file affidavit, correct?
Correct.
In that filing affidavit you completed in the rest of this case, was there any mention of a neighbor having video surveillance, the Daniels, or a neighbor providing still images of the arrest?
Not that I recall.
Was that an additional oversight in completing the paperwork?
I recall emailing that photograph that was emailed to me, emailing that to the assigned state attorney.
When in reference to the arrest of Mr. Tillis?
I do not recall.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
For the record, I'm showing the witness what has previously been marked for identification as Defense A. Sergeant, please look in that folder. Don't take the item out, but take a look at it. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Does that appear to be one of the rocks you threw at Mr. Tillis' house?
No, sir.
So you didn't throw that?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks. If I could have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Last question, Sergeant Bailey. When you went over the fence, you're the one on the video that you can see his fall, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was the fence unstable to get over?
No, sir.
You didn't have any problems,
No, sir.
other than catching your shoelace?
Correct.
You didn't notice the gate kind of moving at all?
Not that I recall.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Anything else to the witness?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sir, did you ask about the evidence technician being a male or a female? You've since testified that the evidence technician was a male, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you recall the date of your deposition when you testified that the evidence technician was a female?
I do not.
Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Sergeant, can you please take a look at this cover page? It's for court and counsel in front of page 1, the title page of the depositions. Do you see the date that it reads on there?
March 14, 2016.
So Detective, correct me if I'm wrong, that's some 10 months after the date of arrest in this case. 10 months after you actually had your encounter with the defendant, is that correct?
Correct.
Detective, you stated earlier that knowing what you know now as a sergeant, you still would not have chased the defendant onto his property and kicked open his door on the 26th when he ran for you, is that correct?
That's correct.
Why is that?
Based on how the proximity that we were away from him and the nature of the weapon.
And is that your understanding of the Sheriff's Office current policy and current protocol in regards to what you labeled fresh pursuit or hot pursuit?
Correct.
Now, there were a lot of questions asked about whether you logged in or you logged out. Just so we're clear, do you have any idea whether you logged in or logged out on the 26th?
I do not.
Do you have any idea whether you logged in or logged out on the 27th?
I do not.
In every case that you handled, you immediately thereafter go and pull what the fence is referred to, your log of whether you log in or log out.
In my 11 years, I've never pulled my logs.
There's a lot of talk about things you did not document in any reports. Do you generate a report for everything you do?
No, sir.
Are you going to generate a report about this testimony that you're giving right now when you leave here today?
No, sir.
Objection, Your Honor, improper question.
Sustained.
Detective, what is it that you determined how is it that you determine when you're going to write a report?
Based on the nature of the incident and the requirements.
If you have contact with the witness and they tell you that they don't know anything about a case, or I guess they wouldn't be a witness at that point, but if you have contact with an individual and they tell you they don't know anything about a particular case, do you immediately turn around and write a report in regards to that?
No, sir.
If you go to a scene to collect evidence and ultimately determine that there's no evidence to be collected, do you immediately turn around and write a report document?
No, sir.
Detective, you talked a little bit about auditory exclusion. You stated that's something that occurs when you're involved in a stressful incident. Is that correct?
Correct.
Was this a stressful incident?
Sure.
Which portion of this was stressful?
I would say from the point where we were confronted in the front yard, or in the street, until ultimately Mr. Tillis was taken into custody.
And what made that stressful?
Based on initially thinking that we were going to be ambushed, based on Mr. Tillis's actions from running down his neighbor's property until he stepped out into confronting us in the street, and until we chased him through his yard, pursuing him, knowing that he was armed with a knife in each hand, and then struggling with him to gain control and place him in handcuffs.
Now, Sergeant, you testified that after watching the video, you changed your mind in regards to approximately how far Sergeant Luis was from the defendant when he pursued him. Originally in your report, it was brought out that you wrote in your sworn affidavit, as defense referred to it, 12 feet, is that correct?
Correct.
You've since changed your position on that?
Yes.
And was that the benefit of having to review that surveillance?
Correct.
How far now would you say you think it was?
I would estimate it at approximately 24 feet.
Sergeant, reviewing that video change your position as to whether or not this defendant was holding knives in his hand?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Sustained.
Sergeant, in reviewing this video, did it change your position on any of the things that you wrote in that report?
No, sir.
After reviewing the video, would you change the fact that you mentioned the defendant had knives in his hand?
It would not.
Would it change the fact that you indicated the defendant squared up to you outside of the property?
It would not.
Would it change the fact that the defendant squared up to you inside the property?
It would not.
Permission to publish the photos that have previously been entered into evidence, Your Honor?
Okay.
Detective, is your screen on?
No, sir.
If you would, please touch it with your finger for me firmly, and let me know when it turns on.
It's on now.
Detective, I'm showing you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 6. There was some talk about where the defendant fell down as Sergeant Weeks was pursuing him in his backyard. Can you see the well in this photograph?
In this photograph now.
Can you see the front of the truck in this photograph?
And Your Honor, for the record, states 7 is up on the screen.
And Your Honor, I think I previously mentioned this, the State's Exhibit number on the bottom right-hand corner is one off because some things were entered slightly out of order. I'll refer to them as State's G to make the record very clear. What's marked as State's Exhibit G on the bottom left of the photograph, do you see the well in that exhibit?
No, sir.
Do you recall where the well is in proximity to the front of this truck?
It is approximately 10 feet off the front right of this vehicle.
So when you say something is near the front of the truck, could it also be near the well at the same time?
Yes, sir.
Sergeant, you were asked whether or not you saw the defendant drop the knives or throw the knives onto the ground. Now you testified that you saw the defendant turn and face Sergeant Weeks and then turn around and ultimately run around the front of the truck. Did you maintain visual contact with what was in the defendant's hands that entire time?
I did not.
You're also asked a little bit about pain compliance. Is that something you're taught in the police academy?
It is.
When is that something that you're taught is appropriate to use?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
Sergeant, if you could tell the jury when that is something that you're taught that's appropriate to use, pain compliance techniques.
When you have a subject who is armed, especially when they're armed, however, they're meeting you with resistance and struggling, and there is a struggle between the two of you, to overcome the resistance, you have to use compliance. And ways that you are taught is to strike them in the shoulder area, to strike them in the common frontal. So you use those techniques to gain compliance from them, to apprehend them and place them under arrest. At the time, you believed that he was still armed with a knife, and this is an armed individual. So striking him to get him to free his hands from underneath him while he is actively resisting our efforts to apprehend him was what we believed we needed to do to effect that arrest.
Sergeant, you stated that at that point you thought the defendant was still armed. Would you have been entitled to use any greater force than just the pain compliance you used that day?
Absolutely. Deadly force would have been justified, in my opinion.
But Sergeant, you didn't use anything other than pain compliance techniques, correct?
Correct.
That day, did you have your firearm on you?
I did.
Did you have your pepper spray on?
I did.
Did you have what's called a stun gun or a taser?
I did.
And a moment ago, you testified that you believe this is a lethal situation, or a situation in which you'd be allowed to use justifiable lethal force, correct?
Correct.
Would you have been allowed to use any of those means to subdue this armed defendant or defendant you believed to be armed at that point?
Yes, sir.
Thirdly, you were asked about some of the photographs that were the still frames from the Eichenloff's video. In having the opportunity to review the videos or the still frame images from the Eichenloff surveillance, did you see any angle, any photo, or any reason to believe that any of those cameras captured what was going on the defendant's property?
No, sir.
Can you explain to the jury what separated Mr. Eichenhoff's property and the defendant's property?
There's approximately a 15-foot wall that's made up of, as we mentioned earlier, various materials such as plywood and vinyl, to where you cannot see through between the two properties.
Detective, you were also shown some surveillance here in court, and you were asked about that. That was obtained from an individual by the name of Brandon Daniels, or at least when you saw it, it was in the possession of an individual named Brandon Daniels. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that video, that same video we watched in front of the jury, State's Exhibit 1, the same video that you watched that day?
Yes, sir.
So ultimately that evidence was obtained, is that correct?
That's correct.
Sergeant, when Mr. Eichenhoff gave you still photographs, what did you do with them?
I emailed the photographs to the assigned state attorney.
And on hindsight, would it have been better protocol or proper protocol to turn those into evidence in this case?
Yes.
Did those photographs ultimately make it to the prosecuting agency, the state attorney's office, who's responsible for the prosecution of the case?
Yes, they did.
Your Honor, may I have 1 moment?
Yes, sir.
No further questions for this witness. It's time, Your Honor.
Anything else for the witness?
Yes, sir, may we approach?
Yes, sir. Madam Clerk,
Please.
Anything else for the witness?
No, Your Honor.
Nothing further from the state, but Your Honor, we would ask to be subject to recall.
Okay, you're free to go, subject to recall. And I think our last break, we didn't take a break, you did, so I'm gonna give you guys another break. Just for a few minutes, remember, do not discuss the case, and we'll see you back out in a few minutes.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thanks, sir, if you have a seat. So remember to pull your chair forward, speak into the microphone, and adjust it however you like.
Good afternoon, sir. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Dale Taylor.
Okay. And sir, during the course of this question, make sure you keep your voice up because Madam Court Reporter needs to take down everything that's being said. You're doing a good job so far. Sir, where do you currently reside? What city and state?
Where I currently live,
Yes, sir.
New Orleans, Louisiana.
How long have you lived there?
2 years.
Sir, prior to moving to New Orleans, did you live here in Jacksonville?
Yes, sir.
And at some point during your time here in Jacksonville, did you actually reside on the property owned by Mr. Russell Tillis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you obviously then know Mr. Tillis, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I do.
Was there any sort of financial arrangement that allowed you to stay on that property?
Yes, sir, I'm on an RV on the front right corner of the property, and I pay him lot rent.
Okay, and was that essentially the same amount that you had previously been paying a trailer park or something like that?
Yes, sir.
As you're looking at Mr. Tillis's property, if you could describe to the jury, where was your RV located?
The right front side of the property, close to the road.
And sir, approximately, I understand an exact date might be difficult to provide, but approximately when did you move your RV onto Mr. Tillis's property?
My middle brother died around just before Christmas, so it was that's probably the end of December.
And that would have been 2014, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And then when did you move off of that property?
Following that after Russell Tillis was arrested.
Okay. Sir, I'd like to direct your attention to approximately 3-4 days prior to the date that Mr. Tillis was arrested. Were you there on the property with Mr. Tillis?
Yes, sir.
And did something of significance occur while you and Mr. Tillis were on the property approximately 3-4 days before he was arrested?
Yes, sir, it did.
Yeah, just describe to the jury what you recall happening, again, 3 or 4 days before Mr. Tillis was arrested.
Well, Russell had told me he had a girlfriend, which I never
Okay,
knew.
but let me back up, Mr. Bean. All I want you to describe is what you saw or, that day on Mr. Tillis's property.
All right, the three individuals were out there beating him up, whatever, they were all fighting. And I heard all this on the trail, I heard it, so I walked outside, and I went to jump over the fence to go help him. One of them had a knife and was coming at him. And when I went to jump the fence, that's when he got back away from him. And then the other guy went out to the car and had a baseball bat.
Okay.
And then,
Let me stop you there, Mr. Bean. Had you ever seen any of these 3 people before?
no, sir, I haven't.
Okay. Never seen them on Mr. Tillis' property?
No, sir.
Could you describe generally what these 3 people look like?
One was a black individual and 2 white guys, and one had short hair, one of the white guys didn't know, and had real long hair.
Okay.
If I remember.
And when you what first alerted you to something going on that day?
I was in the trail, I just heard out there yelling and hollering, when I see what was going on.
And when you went out there, was someone actually in the process of battering or beating up Mr. Tillis?
Yeah, he had him on the ground, and then Russell got away from him. And that's about the time I came out, and the other guy had a knife.
Okay. And what did Mr. Tillis do? What did Russell do after he was able to get off the ground?
Honestly, I don't remember, because that was about the time I was fixing to come over the fence, and the other guy ran out to his car after that. And then when he he seen the guy, Russell ran in the backyard around the house, and they followed him, chasing him. And then there was a truck sitting in the front driveway, and they busted the windshield out with the bat. And I followed around the house and see what was going on. Time I got back around to the front of the house, the windows were busted out, and they were gone. They got the car took off.
And to be clear, I believe you testified, it's Mr. Beam, but essentially, Mr. Tillis ran towards the back of his property after he was able to get off the ground.
Yes, sir. Correct.
Mr. Beam, let me ask you, have you ever been convicted of a felony?
Yes, sir, I have.
How many times?
5.
Mr. Beam, were you in your RV the night Mr. Tillis was arrested?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What, if anything, prior to Mr. Tillis being arrested, did you hear or see anything out of the ordinary?
Yes, sir.
What did you see or hear?
The rocks were being thrown at the RV on top of the truck.
How did you know that?
Because I was inside of it.
Okay. And could you hear the rocks striking your...
Oh, yeah, they were being thrown. They warned my attention. Whoever it was wanted me to come out.
And how many do you think landed on your trailer?
Probably at least 5, 6, maybe 7, maybe more.
And did you have any communications with Mr. Tillis after you heard these rocks hitting your trailer?
Yes, sir. After 3 or 4 rocks hit the trailer, maybe 5 or whatever, Russell called me and he goes, "Did you know somebody was going to rock the trailer?"
And did you respond, "Yes, I heard it"?
I can't help it. I'm sitting here listening to the panel on the sides and the top.
Did Mr. Tillis describe to you who he thought was throwing these rocks?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what did he say?
Me and
Objection,
both
Your
of
Honor.
us.
Hold on before you answer.
Hearsay.
Sustain.
Your Honor, I believe it falls under the present sense impression.
The objection is sustained.
Okay. Mr. Beam, who did you think were throwing rocks at your trailer?
The people that were out there with the baseball bats tonight, and that's exactly what Russell had said on the phone. It's probably the guys from last week or a few days ago.
And did you and Mr. Tillis come up with some sort of plan on how to see if that was in fact the case?
Yes, sir.
And what did you agree to do as part of that plan?
He was gonna go out from one side of the property, I was gonna come out on the side where we were gonna read that, and if we're thinking of the hoodlums, if I need help, I'll, if he needs help, he help.
And how, at some point, do the sound of the rock stop?
Pretty much about the time we got off the phone, that's about, I think maybe one more rock probably hit me, that's pretty much about it.
Okay. And what's the next thing that you remember seeing or hearing?
Just the word, "Hey." I don't know, we come from the other side of the property, I don't ever walk outside. And I don't know who said it, I couldn't tell if it was his voice or what, but that's pretty much after the rocks, the next thing I heard was just, "Hey," you yelled out real loud.
Someone yelled, "Hey."
Someone yelled.
And you couldn't tell who that was?
No, I wasn't sure.
Do you, at some point, look out towards the front of the yard of the Tillis property?
Yes, right. Once I walked out the trailer, I was at the cross fence between his driveway and my front yard. And yes,
And what do you see when you go out there?
I see Russell running from the far corner of the front yard to his driveway, past the front of my RV, towards the back of the RV.
And as Mr. Tillis is running, do you ever see him turn around?
No, sir.
Do you see anyone chasing Mr. Tillis as he's running, as Mr. Tillis is running through his property?
Yes, sir, I did.
Who did you see chasing Mr. Tillis?
Approximately 6, maybe 8 police officers.
Okay. And did you hear the police officer saying anything either before you saw Mr. Tillis running or during that run?
No, sir.
Okay.
Just the word, "Hey," that was the only thing I heard until they all ended up at the back of my RV.
And that's what we'll discuss next, Mr. Bean. Once you get to the back of the RV, what, if anything, can you see of the incident happening outside the RV?
When I realized there were police officers myself, I'm like, "Well, this ain't for me." I turned around and went back in my RV. As I was going to the front door, the back part of my RV had a little walkway, going like a little backyard area, we could get into the back and front, and I had a little wall. So it was about a 2-foot bottom to it. That way he can see through the gate and everything, kind of see where Russell's yard through, the fenced in completely. And there was 2 posts, probably about that wide, probably 3 foot wide. And when I was going in the RV, I looked to my left near the back of the RV, and I seen Russell's 2 hands going on both posts. And at that point, he just went slam down on the ground.
Okay.
And then I
Let me
didn't see
stop you
him
there,
going,
Mr.
I went on inside the RV myself.
Okay. I have some questions about that, Mr. Beam, and if I might approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Beam, I'm showing you what has been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit A, excuse me, 8. Do you recognize what this picture depicts?
Yeah, that's the gate over here, that's what he was stepping over. Yeah, he's handling those hot.
If you will, I'll point it so that the jury can see. This piece of wood that's on
It's
the
fiberglass. I
fiberglass,
installed doors for a door company, and that's the ceiling.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
okay, just make sure you're talking to her, it's a little off because I'm here.
It's the center of a fiberglass door.
And
We
Mr.
just cut out and replaced glass.
And Mr. Beam, I'm referring to what's on the far left-hand side of State's Exhibit 8. It looked to me like to be a sort of piece of wood. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's the fiberglass. It looks like wood.
How tall is that piece of wood?
Probably that wide, probably 4 foot tall.
And what's the purpose of
Always
having?
falls from the ground up, it's probably not that tall.
Okay, so this piece of fiberglass from the floor up is,
Probably 18 inches, maybe 20. Not to be exact, it'd be 22. I used to cut them out, probably 22 inches on the 2 foot.
and Mr. Beam, what's the purpose for having that piece of fiberglass there?
But this is, my backyard on this side, I believe.
Off to the
well on this side, all of you on that side of the fence. So that was to keep my chihuahua on that way.
Okay, and just so the court will, you refer to a chihuahua?
Puppy.
Okay, okay. And sir, this is the, what we refer to as the well or the decorative well in the middle of State's Exhibit 8, correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
Where, the posts that you said you saw Mr. Tillis grabbing, could you point them out on State's Exhibit 8?
This one and this one over here. There's 2 of them on both sides.
And where are you located physically when you see Mr. Tillis grabbing onto those
Now,
posts?
this is the back of the trailer. He was coming over it. I'm on this side of the fence over here. Front of the trailer, right over here, on this part of the fence.
Off camera.
Off camera.
Yes,
Correct.
thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Beam, when you saw Mr. Tillis grab those posts, could you see anything in either one of his hands?
Just the 2 fence posts where he was trying to grip himself to step over that platform.
And sir, what happened as Mr. Tillis went to grab those posts?
That's when I was going to the front door. I glanced over that way before I went in, and I just seen, I couldn't see the officer anybody, but I seen him move going backwards.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that he was being slammed back.
You can't
Pulled away
testify,
from it.
Mr. Beam, you can't testify that because you didn't see, all you saw was Mr. Tillis.
Grab that, go to step over, and just fly back. That's all I said. I can't describe exactly why he flew backwards, but he flew backwards. But I didn't see that.
After you see Mr. Tillis fly backwards, are you watching what is happening?
Yeah, I just watched him fly backwards, and then I'm like, oh, this ain't for me. I went on my truck, and that's when the actions began at that point.
And what, I'm saying, you couldn't see anything after that?
I couldn't see anything after that. I'm inside the truck at this point.
Could you hear anything?
Yes, sir.
What could you hear?
I could hear the officers, on him, kicking on him, and it seemed to me like it went on for about 15, 20 minutes, but maybe it was only 5, or it was at least 5 minutes, but pretty much, I heard one officer say, what's this, a weapon? And I'm assuming maybe saying a knife or something, and I believe Russell made a statement of like, well, I didn't know who you were, I'm just trying to protect me and my property. And then they're steadily keeping beating on him, he's begging him to stop, and they're steadily pounding beating on him. And that went on for a long period of time.
Mr. Beeble, are you contacted by the police at all that night?
After they were done, it seemed like 15, 20 minutes later, after they were done pounding on him, I turned my lights off, my air conditioning was like, whoa. You know, I don't know if they were doing my light, they were on again with it.
I'm sorry, would you slow down?
Slow down.
I'm sorry.
Understand you.
Okay. I turned the lights and the air conditioning off, and I listened to the beating and the paddling, and whatever length of time that ended, they did come and knock on my door, but I didn't answer.
Okay,
And
so-
they knocked probably 2 or 3 times and finally left.
So that evening, the late on the 27th going into the 28th, you did not have any personal contact with the police?
Not that, no, no, sir.
If I could have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bean, we saw, referring to State's Exhibit 8, that picture I showed you, that well is that a real well, like the old school bucket that goes down in the big hole?
No, sir, it's a fake well.
Does that fake well actually hide or contain a pump and pipes that go down to the ground to pull up water?
There's some type of pump and something in there. I would assume they're going in the ground after the water spigot comes out of it, so it's probably a pipe going in the ground, I would assume.
And those pipes, those pumps, whatever's inside that actual decorative well thing, those are affixed to the ground themselves, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Sustained.
I believe.
Hold on, don't answer, let him ask.
I'm going to rephrase the question, Mr. Bean. Are those pipes, pump that's inside that decorative well, are they affixed to the ground?
I would say yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
the water was coming from and stuff.
Yes, sir. If I could have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ross?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Bean.
Yes, sir.
Now, you originally met this defendant in October of 2014, is that correct?
What was the question?
You originally met the defendant in October of 2014, is that correct?
I was thinking maybe more around after my brother died, it might have been before he died, I really can't recall. It was somewhere down here between October and December.
Somewhere in that area between October and December?
I would assume yes.
You would assume.
It's
Okay.
hard to remember that far back. But it was at the end of the year, somewhere in that time frame.
And in that time frame, you became friends,
Yes, sir. Or ma'am, I'm sorry.
and you started living on his property around February of 2015, correct?
Correct.
And between that time and during the time you were living at his property, you visited with him, correct?
Before I moved in?
You
on
spent
property?
time with him before you moved in.
No, that's incorrect. He would come over and visit my, RV at RV park, so I lived there. I never went to his house,
So-
right. He would come visit with me
Okay, so
before I moved my RV to that property.
he visited with you before you moved onto the property. And then after you moved onto the property, you would visit him, is that correct?
While I was living on the property,
Yes, sir.
on occasions, yes.
Okay.
I
So
spent
it's,
most of my time at home in my RV, but sometimes I'd go visit him, say, hey, Tony, whatever.
but
Take
it's
him
safe
there,
to,
go visit him.
excuse me, I don't want to interrupt you. But it's safe to say that the two of you were friends, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, we've heard testimony about a well, and this is a fake well, correct?
Correct.
It wasn't a real well.
The outside structure is fake, but there is a water pump, well pump on the inside of it. You could actually move the outside structure, that round looking well thing, and your pump's still gonna be there, you can see it. That's like a cover.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. So you can move the structure of the well.
Yes.
Okay. Now, at the time that you were living on the property, the defendant's property had aluminum siding on it, correct?
The what had on the side?
The property that you were living on had aluminum siding
Right, like a fence? Fence
Yes.
on the side, yes.
and metal fence, correct?
I believe so. Some of it's metal, some of it's aluminum.
And some of it was vinyl siding.
Not like plastic.
Yes, sir.
I think the majority of it is vinyl plastic.
But there were several fences along that property, is that correct?
Correct.
I want to talk to you a little bit about this incident that you described with the defendant and the 3 individuals. You don't remember anything about what those individuals looked like, in fact, do you?
No, if they walked in this room right now and sat beside me, I wouldn't have picked them out.
Okay.
I mean, even that day, I mean, I seen them right then and there, but the next day I probably wouldn't, they probably could have came back and still probably wouldn't remember what they looked like.
You didn't remember any distinguishing features on them?
No, I just seen knives and sticks, that's all I'm focused on my head, I ain't really paying attention to them, I'm looking at weapons, you know, 'cause I don't wanna get cut and beat head with that. So I'm more focused on what they had in their hand.
I want to talk to you about the rocks that you hear. You had already indicated on the record that the defendant called you, correct?
Correct.
When you were in your trailer,
Correct.
and told you, do you hear the rocks that are hitting your trailer, correct?
Right, he asked me, do you know that somebody was on a rocket truck?
And you heard about 5 to 7 rocks hit the trailer, correct?
Correct.
And a couple of them hit the side, the fence.
That is very well possible, yeah.
And then the others hit the top of your trailer, correct?
Majority of them was hitting on top of the truck. They were throwing them over the fences and trying to make them land on top of the truck.
Okay.
But one or two hit the side part of the truck on the very tip top of the truck.
So before the defendant called you, the majority of the rocks had already been thrown, correct?
Correct.
And that was approximately 4 to 5, correct?
I was thinking, yes.
And then once you were on the phone with the defendant, you heard maybe 1 or 2 additional rocks.
Exactly.
And then after that, you don't recall hearing other rocks.
No.
Okay.
Pretty much after the phone was on the other, that's pretty much about in the rock.
Okay. Now, these rocks were not thrown quickly, correct? You
I
heard,
was saying probably a 4 or 5 minute time frame, it was 6 or 7 rocks.
so one rock was, you would hear the sound of the rock,
Right, and then another one, maybe 30 seconds might go by and then another one. There was like a time frame in between.
okay.
But there's a couple times maybe 2 landing at the same time like that. And then a few seconds would go by and you hear that. And then you hear that, maybe. There's real. Hard to describe exactly how they were found. There was rocking in the truck, correct?
But each individual sound, there was time that passed in between the next.
Right, unless 2 of them landed like that at one point. You hear like boom, then you might hear boom, boom. You know?
Is it your testimony here today that some of the rocks were thrown right after one another?
Correct.
Okay. Do you recall giving a deposition on March 29, 2017? I was present, as well as Mr. Boyle.
It was when I was in New Orleans.
Yes.
On the video, yes.
And do you recall being placed under oath?
Yes.
Give me one moment. For counsel, I'm referring to page 33. Do you recall, Mr. Bean, I asked you in that deposition, were the rocks very quick or was there time in between the rocks? You indicated to me there was kind of like time in between them, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, improper impeachment. That's exactly what he testified to.
Well, then we can ask that, you're right.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall saying in your deposition that there was time in between the rocks being thrown?
I believe it's what it said just now too. Correct?
Okay. Well, today your testimony is that some of the rocks hit one after each other, instead of there being time in between each rock. So which
I
is it?
don't comprehend what you're trying to say.
Okay.
As far as what, the rocks were getting thrown, I mean, how am I supposed to remember 2 years ago exactly how these rocks got my truck? There was rocks getting thrown in my truck, I was trying 6 or 7 of them.
6 or 7 rocks.
I can't recall exact time frame in between these rocks, I mean, come on.
All right. Now, you saw these police officers so well that you wondered why they didn't see you, correct?
Yeah, I did, I wondered why they didn't see me, because I'm standing right there in the main thing, they're so focused on him, and he ran around past me, and I don't think none of them even see me. any standard,
There were 6 to 7 police officers, correct?
maybe even 8. Yeah. And I might be wrong, count, it was 10 or 12. That's basically what I recall. I think I seen was always 6 or 8.
10 or 12?
I have no clue. I'm saying 6 or 8 because that's what, it's kind of hard to picture how many running through. It wasn't 1 or 2, I know that. It wasn't 3 or 4. There was at least 6 or 8. As far as that goes, when I turned around back in the trail, there could have been another, not that seeing them, but there could have been more. And
And
then,
it's,
I
excuse me,
can't tell you that even if that count on 8. You know, there could have been just 6. But there was at least 6, but I would say probably 8.
and Mr. Beam, as soon as these officers passed you, going up the driveway, you realized that they were police officers, correct?
Yes, I did.
You realized that there were police officers behind Russell Tillis?
Yes.
Okay. And where were you standing when you realized that?
And pretty much my front yard, where the cross fence is going to his driveway.
And so that's when you said, I mean, you figured in your head, well, this has nothing to do with me, right?
Exactly. That's why I would turn around and went right back inside my RV.
And you went in your trailer and you turned off your air conditioning and you said you just listened.
Correct. Man, my life. I see the way they just laying on the ground, getting pulled off the back of the fence, and I start hearing them beating on them, kicking on them, and whatever else they're doing to them. So I'm like, I don't want them to come turn me up, trailer, and be the same way, so I just act like I wasn't even there.
You didn't want the police officers to see you. You
No, I
want-
didn't. I never, after him being slammed down, and I'm hearing him getting beat on, and he's like, hey, I didn't know you were, quit beating on me, or still studying down on me, beat the brains in. I don't want them to do that to me, so I'm just being quiet, as possibly be. That was my purpose, to turn off my lights and air conditioning, and not want them to be involved with that part.
So the reality is that as soon as you saw them, you closed your door and you didn't see anything else.
Except for him being pulled off the post and being slammed back, that's all I said.
So when would you have had an opportunity to see him getting pulled on a post?
Because when I'm going to my front door, there's a little tiny breezeway going to that back gate area where I can see the post and I can see his hand on it. And then him trying to step over that boardwalk, and that's when I went at my door, and that's when he got smacked back.
You saw the police officers, one of them at least, from what you recall, was wearing long sleeves, correct?
I would say 2, maybe 3 or 4 of them were wearing like not normal regular police uniforms. They were like more like a SWAT uniform, a tactical gear or something. Something the police officer normally would wear.
And when you first saw those police officers, you believed them to be SWAT?
Yeah, or they're trying to be described, where I can see them and know who they are. They're trying to be hidden in the dark. If they, you got white complexion, you're gonna show up in there. If they got dark sleeves and eyes in the bush or whatever, then they're not gonna see them.
In the time you said you were looking through the breezeway, you were not looking at the defendant's hands at that time.
When I went to open my door and I looked to the left, by the side of my trailer, that gives me a view of that little walkway area. I've seen both his hands holding the post and his foot trying to go over, and then I see him back. Why he went backwards, I have no clue, but I was able to see that walk. And at that point, during that section in front of that gate area, was well over that.
But were there 2 different times that you saw the defendant?
2 different times, yeah, as soon as he passed by me, then I turned around and get in my door. The fence is right there, so I don't see him for a few minutes.
Okay.
I don't see the police for a few minutes. Well, I don't see the police no more at that point, but I do see his hands, his face, and him going back.
The second time.
So
is
there
your
was
testimony.
2 times I seen him, he passed it in front of that trailer. After I turned around and got to my front door, I looked back to the little breezeway to my back gate, and that's when I seen him second time. Correct.
You have spoken to this defendant since his arrest, is that correct?
I spoke to who?
You've spoken to Russell Tillis since his arrest, correct?
I still didn't understand what.
Have you spoken to Russell Tillis since his arrest?
I think he sent one letter one time, when I moved to a different RV park. But as far as talking with him, no.
Do you recall giving a deposition? Again, same deposition, March 29th, 2017.
Is that the one when I did all the New Orleans on the video?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I recall that.
Okay. Do you recall stating in that deposition that you had spoken to the defendant?
Page and line, please.
I didn't-
44, lines 9 and 10.
Can you repeat the question again?
Sir, do you recall in that deposition indicating that you had spoken to the defendant since his arrest?
I don't recall saying I spoke to him.
Your Honor,
Do you
improper,
think referring to your...
Hold on.
Excuse me.
Do you have a legal objection?
Improper.
What is your legal objection?
improper impeachment.
Sustain.
Would referring to your deposition refresh your recollection?
Sure.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
And again, page 44.
Maybe I
line-
did, I didn't say 2 years.
Hold on, just
Okay.
hold on. Wait for the next question.
If you could just take a moment to review it.
So we were 9 to 10, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I said, yeah.
Wait, don't say anything, wait for the next question.
So the next question is, having reviewed this deposition, does that refresh your recollection about whether or not you have spoken to the defendant since he was
I
arrested?
honestly don't believe I've spoken to him verbally, because I never went to jail and visited him.